Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today. This is your primetime destination for the news, the newsmakers, the talking points. Let's get cracking with the 9 headlines at 9 tonight. History is created in Ayodhya as the Ram Mandir Bhumi Pujan begins. The Prime Minister leads the celebrations, hails the temple as a symbol of unity. India records its highest single-day COVID-19 recoveries with over 51,700 people being cured in the last 24 hours. Total recovered cases now double the active infections. Heavy rains batter Mumbai for a second consecutive day. Waterlogging, flooding reported in several parts of the city. Meteorological department says downpour to intensify. The government appeals to people to stay indoors. Centre approves the Bihar government's recommendations for a CBI probe in the Sushant Singh Rajput death case. Supreme Court gives the Mumbai police time to submit all case diaries by next week. ED summons actor Riya Chakravarti on the 7th of August. DMK suspends MLA KK Selvam over a meeting with BJP chief JP Nadda. Selvam rejects defection rumours, says he's not joining the BJP. Under attack from his own party, Punjab Chief Minister Captain Amrinder Singh calls the Hooch tragedy a sheer murder, vows he won't spare those responsible for 112 deaths in the state. Curfew in Kashmir on the first anniversary of the Article 370 abrogation, grenade attacks in Srinagar and Shopian, no injuries reported. Fireworks and ammonium nitrate appeared to have ignited a massive explosion that rocks the Lebanese capital of Beirut. At least 100 people killed, nearly 4,000 injured in the blast. The toll has risen, in fact, to 135 now. India captain Virat Kohli and his deputy Rohit Sharma retained the top 2 positions in the ICC ODI rankings for batsmen. Jasprit Bumrah holds on to the number 2 spot among bowlers in the latest list. But let's come to the breaking news that's coming in this evening at the very top. Situation in Mumbai has turned very grim after heavy rains have lashed the city. 5 NDRF teams have now been rushed to Mumbai. Remember, warnings now issued asking people to stay indoors for the next 24 hours at least. So the big news at the moment is coming in from Mumbai, where heavy rains have lashed the city, led to damage, and reports now saying that for the next 24 hours at least, people of Mumbai must stay indoors. So that's the big news that's coming in at the moment from Mumbai. The Chief Minister, Uddhav Thackeray, has reportedly reviewed the situation a short while ago. I'm joined by Kamlesh Sutar and Saurabh Vakhtania for the very latest. First to you, Kamlesh, we are told the Chief Minister has reviewed the situation in Mumbai, people being advised to stay indoors for the next 24 hours.
Well, indeed, the situation remains on red alert as it was yesterday, Rajdeep. The BMC has issued alert, and even Aditya Thackeray along with Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray have appealed people to stay indoors and not to venture out unless and until it is very necessary. Mumbai has witnessed flooding in several parts, especially in low-lying areas. Thankfully, due to pandemics, one can say there are no office activities, or the trains are only running with limited capacity and only for essential services. So Mumbai, like earlier, isn't on a complete standstill, but the situation in several parts of Mumbai, there have been waterlogging from knee-deep level to west level, several incidents of tree fall, tree uprooted being reported, and at several places severe waterlogging has been reported. The BMC says it is trying its best to flush out all the water. Pumps have been installed at several places, especially chronic spots where waterlogging is witnessed every year.
Let me just take that. Let me take that to Saurabh.
Gandhi Market.
Let me take that to Saurabh Vakhtania. Saurabh Vakhtania, where you are, we are told that there is particularly parts of the city where some of the seawater, because of high tide, has also now come onto roads, and that has led to flooding. The good news, of course, is because of the corona pandemic, people are not venturing outdoors. I can see behind you some traffic, but has the rain lessened in any way?
Well, yes, the rainfall has now lessened, but even you know that we have not witnessed waterlogging in South Mumbai, but particularly today, since last 12 hours, it is raining very heavily in the South Mumbai itself. The IMD officials have told us that over 250 mm of rainfall just in South Mumbai, whereas 70 to 80 mm of rainfall in the suburb. Most of the places, the posh locations like the Pedder Road, Babulnath, Girgaon and Mantralay and so many places are completely submerged in water. Where I am right now standing is the Worli Century Bazaar area, and even here the one side of the road is completely submerged in water. This is very different phenomena, Rajdeep. We have not seen such waterlogging in South Mumbai in several years earlier. Now the IMD what have said there is a likelihood of very intense rainfall in the night. So they have given a prediction that by tonight in next 12 hours there will be very heavy to very heavy rainfall in the city of Mumbai.
So what you are saying is that there could be even heavier rainfall. You are saying there could be even heavier rainfall tomorrow, therefore people being asked to stay indoors in Mumbai for the next 24 hours. Lots of trees have fallen, power cuts in several parts of the city. Appreciate. In the hospital there, JJ Hospital, you can see the water now has entered the hospital as well. Remember, Mumbai has been battling corona, but these are the images that we are getting at the moment. So clear monsoon mayhem, as you can see, has wreaked havoc in Mumbai this evening. Those are some of those images. We'll have much more of that later on in the show. Let's turn from there to the big political story of the day. The Bhumi Pujan for the construction of a Ram temple was held today in Ayodhya. Prime Minister Narendra Modi laid the foundation with a brick made of pure silver. In fact, Mr. Modi was the center of all attention. Later, he delivered a speech calling Ram a symbol of unity. On the stage, though, were only leaders who had allegiance to the Sangh Parivar. Take a look at today's big political story.
A
few seconds past 12:40, the Abhijit Muhurat, when Lord Ram was born, Prime Minister Narendra Modi laid the foundation for a grand Ram temple. A silver brick weighing 40 kilos was used for the Bhumi Pujan, held at the very same spot where Ram Lalla was born. Modi was flanked by UP Governor Anandiben Patel, Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath and RSS Chief Mohan Bhagwat at the ceremony supervised by over 130 sons and seers from across the country. This was Modi's first visit to Ayodhya in nearly 30 years. The last time he came here was during the initial years of the Ram Mandir movement. After offering prayers at the Hanuman Gadi temple, the Prime Minister reached the Ram Janmabhoomi, where he did the Sakshat Dandvat Pranam, total submission to the Lord. He then prayed to Ram Lalla, the deity that symbolizes the childhood of Ram.
प्रधानमंत्री जी का आगमन मंच पर हो गया है। उनके पीछे उत्तर प्रदेश की राज्यपाल।
The mood throughout was electric but not triumphalist. The subtlety was not missed when Prime Minister Modi addressed the gathering.
सियापति रामचंद्र की, सियापति रामचंद्र की, सियापति रामचंद्र की।
Jai Shri Ram, the invocation during the Mandir movement, gave way to Jai Siya Ram, the commoner's invocation, one that gives Mata Sita and Bhagwan Ram equal prominence. The spotlight was on the many shades of Ram, the Maryada Purushottam, who embodied the best qualities of man.
हमें आपसी प्रेम और भाईचारे के जोड़ से राम मंदिर की इन शिलाओं को जोड़ना है। हमें ध्यान रखना है, जब जब मानवता ने राम को माना है, विकास हुआ है।
The just ruler who treated all his subjects equally, who belonged to all.
आखिरकार राम सबके हैं, राम सब में है।
and the man who inspired generations in their fight against injustice. Prime Minister Modi, in his speech, stressed on Ram's ability to unite. The message was simple: it's time to move on. The nation is at a significant crossroads in this moment in history. Will it put the past behind and heal old wounds?
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in his speech at the Ram Janmabhoomi temple site after the Bhumi Pujan, tried to strike a reconciliatory note. He did not use Jai Shri Ram because that has become a reminder of aggressive Hindutva. He told the audience that the Ramcharitmanas is extremely inclusive in its philosophy. The attempt was perhaps to apply a balm on old wounds. But the Prime Minister and the BJP needs to know that the politics of divide and earning dividends need to end before any sense of old hurt can be cured. At the Bhumi Pujan site in Ayodhya with Sanjay Chaudhary, Rahul Srivastav for India Today.
Let's raise some big questions. What does Ram mean for a new India? Will the Mandir end up dividing or uniting? Was the Bhumi Pujan at the end of the day a Sarkari function and not a universal function? Some of the questions that we'll raise today. I spoke earlier to the BJP Rajya Sabha MP and party ideologue Swapan Dasgupta. Listen in to him on this question. And joining me now is the BJP's Rajya Sabha MP and a party ideologue, Dr. Swapan Dasgupta joins me. Appreciate your joining us, Dr. Dasgupta. Let me start by asking you what this day means for you, because you were someone who, when the Ram Janmabhoomi agitation was taking place, described it as the political Hindu awakening. How do you see it today? What would you call today when the Bhumi Pujan took place?
Well, it's a day of utmost significance, but it's a day of utmost significance for two different reasons. One, that a momentous victory, the first step of a momentous victory, I would call it a total victory. I would call it the culmination will be when the temple itself is inaugurated. But it is a momentous victory insofar as that it has been achieved so far through purely constitutional and relatively peaceful means. I think you will admit that from 1992 onwards, or 1993 onwards, the whole movement has followed a very, very different trajectory from the one which we witnessed between 89 and 93, where it was militant, it was aggressive, and there were incidents of violence which took place. And there was a great deal of Hindu assertiveness. I think after that, there was a strategic...
But how do you distinguish the two? Sorry to intervene. How do you distinguish the two? Because that movement from 89 to 93 led to a demolition of a mosque. It sparked off bloody rioting, divided communities, and today a majority BJP government is in power when the temple is being built.
Yes, it is a majority BJP government which is in power. And I think what happened, that assertiveness between 89 and 93 was partly responsible for creating that awakening. But what was not needed was to demolish an existing constitutional order. So I think what took place was, one, a show of strength, if you might call it, which actually impressed upon a large section of the establishment, plus a large section of the Hindu community, that these are the lacuna in our existing secular setup, and they needed to be filled up. But that they can be filled up within the existing order by really a change of direction in the politics of the country. And I think that's really what happened. And that's why I would be very careful. I would insist that we divide the movement into two very, very separate phases.
So it's interesting the way you're putting it. You are in a way acknowledging that what happened on December 6, 1992 shouldn't have happened. It was a criminal act. But that what's happened subsequently, you're claiming, has moved through the constitutional process. And I repeat my question, is it as easy as you make it out to be to divide the two? Because let's be honest, the same movement that led to the demolition also led to the BJP eventually coming to power. You cannot divorce the two, can you?
The term criminal act is your coinage, and let's be very clear about that. It's not something which came out of my lips. It was
Supreme Court coinage, Dr. Das.
They may have called it, but it's something which I haven't said. What I have said, what I would say is that perhaps the demolition of 1992 December was not planned, but it was almost inescapable under the circumstances, because in the manner in which an entire political system, an entire establishment had ganged up to prevent the articulation and acknowledgement of a groundswell of Hindu sentiment, it led to that. Had some of those sentiments been acknowledged and certain steps being taken to redress that, it is entirely possible that the course of temple building in the Ram temple building in Ayodhya may have taken a slightly different route. What I'm saying is that the denial of the legitimacy of the movement by a very large section led to this sense of provocation and therefore over-aggressiveness, which manifested itself despite the attempts by the leaders on December 6, 1992. And I think after December 6th, you saw two things. One, a sense of awakening of the Hindus, but at the same time, it was definitely a period marked by intense violence, and the Bombay riots were the most visible example of that. But so there was a time where you have to say, you have to, cry halt to a process which could lead to unchecked violence all over India.
Today the Prime Minister, Dr. Dasgupta, said the Ram temple will become a symbol of our devotion, our national sentiment. This temple will also symbolize the power of collective resolution of crores of people. It will keep inspiring future generations. How do you see, what is the Prime Minister really suggesting? That the Ram temple itself is a symbol of the aspirations of power? Because there are those, for example, like Pratap Bhanu Mehta, who will turn around and say that this is the first example, as he's called it, of the real colonization of Hinduism by a political power. How do you see, is it a symbol of devotion or a symbol of power?
I think it's a symbol of collective aspirations. It's a symbol of a lot of things. One, the Prime Minister also mentioned the continuity between the struggle for independence, which happened, which culminated in 1947, and this marking another phase of that, the continuity, which is that while political power devolved to Indians, I think the creation of a self-confident citizenry, and I would say the Hindus are very important in terms of defining what is India, have really today, in some senses through the Ayodhya movement, but not entirely, a lot of it needs to be done, regain that confidence whereby this series of defeats which marked the collective history of the Hindus for a very, very long time, for about 1,000 years, was in some ways checked and arrested. And for the first time, you could say that the Hindus say, look, we have been able to do justice to the inheritance, our inheritance, and start once again, with a mood of renewed self-confidence. And the Prime Minister's speech was more or less...
But how would you then respond?
He was talking about the future. He was talking about an aspect of Ram, which was not about war, which was not about recrimination, which was about how to build a kingdom, kingdom in the Ram context. He was therefore quoted very well from the Ramcharitmanas to say that there are aspects of governance, there are aspects of modernity, there are aspects which can be epitomized in this temple. And that's only a symbol, but it's a very, very important symbol. And you understand the importance of symbolism in the life of a nation.
But you know, there will be those who will maintain that the spiritual, philosophical aspects of Hinduism have lost out to the temporal aspect. This is a political symbol. That at the end of the day, this temple becomes a symbol of political triumph. Jai Shri Ram is more a political slogan than a religious or spiritual one. It's not Ram as Maryada Purushottam, as sacrificing, as looking at the higher values of life, but Ram asserting himself in some kind of a dominant way. How do you know, much more macho, martial symbol of Ram? How do you respond to that?
I think there are two different aspects. You know, there is an aspect of Hinduism which is really all about the spiritual, the metaphysical aspects, and that was very personal in a lot of ways. I mean, one of the reasons why the Hindus as a collective often lost out was that they kept their feelings to themselves as personal entities. I think this was one of the first attempts after a long time. Shivaji may have tried it at one time, the Marathas and the Peshwas may have tried it in a limited way, but after a very long time, to get the Hindus to act in a sense of collective. So you're right insofar as saying that there is an element of politics involved in it. There is a the point of what you call the spiritual and the metaphysical, the higher realms of life have always been there. Unfortunately, they've also been trampled and kicked underfoot, and the loss of political power has also meant, in a large sort of way, the loss of the inheritance, the loss of the richness of your civilization. So unless you control the environment, you're not going to get that richness coming about. So it's also, remember that. I mean, it's great to say, look, we are lost.
When you talk of, sorry to intervene, when you talk of Hindu aspects, sorry to intervene, Dr. Dasgupta, but when you talk of Hindu aspirations, Dr. Dasgupta, you know, there are multiple traditions in Hinduism. That's what sets Hinduism apart from the proselytizing religions. You know, Hinduism doesn't have its Mecca, it doesn't have its Kaaba, it doesn't have its Vatican. You know, it has Vaishnavite traditions, Shaivite traditions. Will that all now be consummated in this one temple, which has suddenly become the symbol of aspirations? I mean, I come back to it. Is that really possible? Is that trying in some way to make Hinduism a mimic of other religions?
Hinduism, firstly to call it Hinduism, as you well know, is a bit of an oversimplification. And there is no such thing. There are a large number of what might loosely be called Hindu faiths, Hindu traditions, and the multiplicity of those traditions are well recognized. And the religious dimensions of those multiplicity, I mean, my inheritance and my religious tradition is entirely non-vegetarian, which might be very different from yours, although I suspect not so much. But the issue today, as the Prime Minister called it, was that it's a temple of modern India. It's a temple of modern India. So it sort of symbolizes both the secular, the national, as well as an element of the religious. And as you know, you witnessed the Ram movement in its full glory, and you saw that there were different currents altogether which were involved in it. There was obviously a very deeply devotional element to that. There was also a political element to that. And there was also, naturally, as happens in all these cases, a very assertive political power alone and, muscle flexing element to it. So these are all there. And the different traditions, like, for instance, take into account the contribution of a very large number of people from Tamil Nadu in the attempts in the post-93, 94 turn of the movement in getting it. If you look at the 92 Karseva, you'll see the large participation of people from Andhra in that. The initial impetus to the movement came a lot from Uttar Pradesh and Gujarat. So you can see that various strands of what might loosely be called the Hindu order has been brought in, because it was not merely a question of devotion to Ram. To some people, Ram is a god. To some people, he's a Maryada Purushottam. And to some people, he is a secular symbol. And I think all three are there. He's a symbol of kingship. So it brings in all of them. I don't think that this idea of occupation of Hinduism is a perversion.
Let me ask you though, sure. But the fact is, and this is my final question here, is that at the end of the day, when the Prime Minister says this temple is a symbol of modern India should be built on values of justice. The fact is, those responsible for the demolition have not been prosecuted. It should be built on values of compassion, where you reach out to minority groups. Instead, we have growing divisions between communities. The notion of Ram Rajya, which Mahatma Gandhi spoke out, was based on values. Today, it doesn't seem to be based on values. It seems to be a triumphant moment, as I said, of political assertion.
I think you may not have listened to the Prime Minister's speech in its entirety. When he spoke about the temple being a symbol of modern India, he also spoke about Ram Rajya, and he elaborated on the particular values which he believed epitomizes Ram, the kingship of Ram. There is an element of Ram which is all about kingship. And those were spelled out in great detail. And strangely enough, Rajdeep, you'll find that they contained almost all the suggestions. I have a feeling that really the objection which people have is the fact that the Supreme Court gave a verdict in favor of creating a temple. And that, I mean, you can talk about the Constitution.
No, I have the objection that the Supreme Court created the temple. That's the Supreme Court's right. But those responsible for demolishing the mosque have not been prosecuted. I think had that happened, you could have actually today then claimed that yes, you prosecuted those responsible for demolishing the mosque, and therefore can claim that we are now setting up on a new chart or a new path.
Well, you can prosecute them. I mean, sure, people in Chauri Chaura were also guilty of breaking the traditions of non-violence, which Mahatma Gandhi advocated, and that was part of the struggle. But I would say that the demolition on 6th December played a monumental role in actually furthering this. And today what we've done is, and I hope whenever it materializes, the actual temple, it will complement. There is the Constitution on one hand, there is the temple on the other hand. Maybe other symbols will also come in. But I think they will be complementing each other in different ways in defining this India. And India, which was not born, you see, some of the mistakes which the so-called constitutionalists make is that by talking about India, which was born only on 26 January 1950, there is a much older India. There is an India which seeps in, which incorporates the tradition, incorporates the values, incorporates the collective memory of the past. And I think this Ram Temple, together with the Constitution, will actually help bridge some of that schism, emotional schism between modernity and tradition, which has been happening in this country. And I believe, therefore, and maybe and I hope I'm right, that it will create the constitutional.
In a sense, therefore, the constitutional republic, according to you, will be replaced by a new republic then?
No, I think it will be enriched by this sense. It will be enriched. The term replacement does not come in. It's enriched. There is another India, an older India, which also has to be embraced and taken into the cosmopolitan view of modernity has often excluded that sense of Indian inheritance. And I think this marks a stage of including that in the larger project of what constitutes modern India.
And I presume it means that in that vision, every Indian is an equal citizen. I presume, therefore, that it will not be seen as a symbol of, in a way, marginalizing the minorities.
Every Indian is an equal citizen, and that our secularism is not irreligiousness. Our secularism means that every faith has a right of worship, but there is something called nationhood, which is different from how the state is. And that nationhood incorporates elements of our culture which predates the Constitution and which has to be incorporated. And the Ram Temple is basically a symbol of some of those impulses.
Let's leave it there. Therefore, Dr. Dasgupta, you've given us your sense of what this day means. Thank you so much for joining me here on the news today. Okay, you've heard the view in a sense from the right. Let's get a view from the left and the center, if we can call it that. Yogendra Yadav, National President, Swaraj India, joining me. Also Pawan Verma, former JDU politician and diplomat, joining me, and also someone who's written extensively on Ram in his various books. Thank you both very much for joining me. Pawan Verma, let me come to you there. You heard Swapan Dasgupta virtually suggesting that Ram should be seen as a symbol of nationhood that connects tradition and modernity. Is he really, do you really see Ram in that form today when this event was performed? Or was this at the end of the day a Sarkari event with all the focus on one man, Narendra Modi? So therefore a show of political power, much less about cultural nationhood.
I think, Rajdeep, that is where the secular critique of what has happened today goes wrong. I don't believe that if a temple at this city, Ayodhya, at a place where millions upon millions of Hindus believe that he was born, after decades of acrimony, or pursuant to a Supreme Court judgment now is built, we are in a sense doing something which breaks with or is necessarily repugnant to, antithetical, hostile to the India that we have. Ram is not a Sarkari deity. Ram is a beloved deity of millions upon millions of Hindus and others who consider him a symbol of ultimate rectitude, Maryada Purushottam Ram.
But today was not. But, but that's in the textbooks. Sorry to interrupt, but what I am referring to what we saw today. Today the focus was on a sense of political power. With the entire sort of event almost, you say Ram is for all, but on the stage are only Sangh Parivar leaders. Is this a Sangh Parivar temple or a Ram temple?
No, you can cavil about or ask a question about who all should have been included. There were limitations on that. But obviously you have to have people included who have fought for the or believed in the fact that a temple needs to be built on this spot. Now you can broad base it through other means, and I think in a sense, Rajdeep, and you may agree with me, the Prime Minister in his speech looked upon Sri Ram as a symbol of the unity of the country. In the description even of Ram Rajya, in Tulsidas's Ramcharitmanas, is Sab Nar Karahi Paraspar Preeti. It's about all the citizens having mutual affection for each other. Now, if what has been done today is used by certain sections to, in a sense, weaponize Ram and use him for irrational anger or unwarranted vengeance or unnecessary violence, it must be condemned. But Ram stands for the Saumya Ras. He is the quintessence of equipoise, of equibalance, of equanimity, of judicial conduct. And therefore, he is not born today. Valmiki's Ramayana has been dated several centuries, if not millennia, before the Common Era.
Let me take what you are saying.
He is a symbol of devotion and faith.
So you believe Ram remains a symbol of devotion and faith, even if at times he may be an instrument for political power. Yogendra Yadav, I want you to respond, because you saw the Prime Minister shift almost the narrative from Jai Shri Ram to Jai Siya Ram. Do you really see that distinction? Can we draw it, as Swapan Dasgupta and even Pawan Verma to an extent seem to suggest, that Ram is universalizing, embracing, given the manner in which we've reached this stage here on August 5th, 2020, the rather bloodied history that has led to this point?
Rajdeep, I would entirely agree with one part of what Pawan Verma is saying. about attributes of Lord Rama, about what Rama stands for in our culture. Of course, he has exactly the kind of virtues that Pawan Verma is describing, and it goes even beyond the normal Hindu belief, because there are so many non-Hindus who have celebrated Rama. But I'm very surprised that Pawan Verma believes that what was celebrated and ritualized today were those virtues. I don't know how. He's normally an astute political analyst. Normally he can see with both his eyes on what's happening on the ground. To my mind, what has happened today has very little to do with religiosity. If it was a ritual, I would say it was a ritual of conquest. That is how it was presented. That's not how it should have been. If the Supreme Court has given an order, whatever I may think of that order, if that order is implemented, I should not be taking objections to that. Mm-hmm. But what we witnessed today was not that. What we witnessed today was neither a celebration of the spiritual virtues of Lord Rama. I thought more than Pawan Verma, at least our friend Swapan Das Gupta was more candid and honest. I think we should discuss some of his opinions. Mm-hmm. What we witnessed was neither that, nor simply a fulfillment of legal requirement. What we've witnessed today was a fusion of multiple layers of power. There was a state power, the Prime Minister of India. I do not know why a Supreme Court mandated decision about disputes between two parties should bring in the Prime Minister of India. Second, there was the BJP as a political party, RSS as an affiliate. Mm-hmm. Third, there was a religious authority which was joined in, and there was, of course, a media power celebration and everything of that kind. So what we witnessed today was fusion of powers, which is what should be questioned, which is what we should think about. But before I leave on this, Rajdeep, I just want to say, I would not wish to waste a big day like this simply questioning what the BJP or Mr. Modi said or did today. I would just quickly mention three big things that we should remember this day. Number one, secularism as we have known it is dead. Number two, its death has vast popular mandate. Large number of people actually participate in it. And number three, those who are responsible for the death of secularism are not just BJP and RSS. Secularism's official custodians, political and intellectual, are primarily responsible for the death of secularism.
Let me take that to Pawan Verma. Has secularism died today, or was the vision of secularism flawed in the first place? The fact that we are getting a Ram temple and the Prime Minister is there in this open expression of state power at the Bhumi Pujan, is that the death of secularism? Is Yogendra Yadav sort of being unnecessarily alarmist? Or is it that our definition of secularism was wrong in the first place? Or are we seeing majoritarianism finally here, the idea of a Hindu Rashtra?
You know, I sometimes wonder, and Yogenji is somebody I respect, this whole business of secularism being dead, if after 136 years of pursuant to a Supreme Court judgment, a temple is built for Sri Ram, I think it is really making an inference which is not warranted by facts. And let me talk about secularism a little, if you will give me a minute more. You see, what has happened, Rajdeep, over the history of the Republic is that a lot of so-called reflex secularists have been scoring self-goals after self-goals. When Dr. Rajendra Prasad was to go to Somnath for the inauguration of the restored temple, why was there an objection? Because secularism has never been defined in our constitution in the Protestant European sense of a complete separation between religion and the state. Dr. Rajendra Prasad said, I'm a practicing Hindu and I cannot cut myself away from my faith, but to assume that because he went, he will now become communal is precisely what reflex secularists said. When Shah Bano case was overruled, secularism did not die. When Hindu personal law was amended and Muslim personal law was amended, secularism did not die. When the entire secular lobby kept a deathly silence, when lakhs upon lakhs of Kashmiri Pandits were forced to leave the valley, secularism did not die. My question to you is, that today we need to revisit the notion of secularism while respecting and emphasizing the respect of all faiths. I know that there is a situation in our country where among certain establishment historians, no, Rajdeep, let me complete, this is important. There is a phobia of the word Hindu in the name of secularism. If I am a student of history, and I have written a lot on Hindu religion and philosophy, if you say, as Gurcharan Das also witnessed, if you say that you are researching or investigating or exploring the possible refinements of ancient India and begin to mention some of them, the reaction usually of reflex secularists is that you are tantamount to being communal. Now this is a period, 4,000-year period of our history. There was in this country an establishment of left-oriented historians who, in my view, have neglected that part of our history, and we are seeing the backlash today, who have neglected that part of our history and associated it simply with superstition, prejudice, ritual and obscurantism.
Should the failings of that reflect, should the failings of that reflect secularism be replaced by what some see as therefore political majoritarianism? That's the question. Nobody denies the failings of reflex secularism.
Now, that's a good question.
Should it be therefore, very quickly here, Pavan Verma, should that be replaced by the idea of a Ram temple as a symbol of the power of the majority?
Certainly not. And I would say that if we look at secularism objectively and seek to correct it without appeasement of any section for vote bank politics and respect for all faiths, I believe it should not lead to Hindu majoritarianism in our republic. And we should fight every attempt to make it so. That is what we are conjoined upon to, but because of the fear of that, to condemn everything that happens, which has a prefix of the word Hindu on it, if it deals with a Hindu god, I believe is committing folly. It creates unnecessary antibodies in a system which feel that for some reason or the other, a great part of our history, culture, civilizational legacy have not been given their due, and even where a temple is concerned, where was Muslim liberal opinion? Who spoke to you privately and said this mosque, we can easily build another one. If crores of Hindus believe that their most popular deity was born here, we should make an adjustment. Why did they speak only in private? Why could not they speak publicly? Why has Muslim opinion been hijacked by the All India Muslim Law Board? Personal law board?
All good points to which I want
to we need to ask ourselves today. So secularism is dead because we build a temple. This is the simplicity. This is the simplicity taken to absurd lengths.
Okay, therefore let Yogendra Yadav have the final word. You are being, it is simpliciter to say secularism is dead because a Ram temple is being built in the manner that it is.
Rajdeep, I think my friend Pavan Verma is badly missing someone from the Congress. If you had put someone from there, the trouble is that you can't even put someone from the Congress. So maybe he's missing a left Nehruvian, which I'm not, as you know. So he's missing someone else, and all his punches are in some weird direction, which I don't understand, because this is exactly what I have criticized secular politics for. And before he spoke, I had said that custodians of secularism are responsible for cutting off from the traditions of this country, from cultures of this country, that therefore we need better connect. And of course, to object to a temple of Lord Rama would be obnoxious. Why should we object to that? That is not the problem. But if in what is being done today, from those lofty ideals to what is happening on the ground, if Mr. Verma does not see any slippage between the two, I can only say I'm truly astonished. I would, of course, privately begin to speculate about Mr. Verma's political trajectory, but I wouldn't do that here. I think what is happening on the ground, if this is not majoritarianism, if this is not majoritarianism, Mr. Pavan Verma, what is political majoritarianism?
So define it for me. Define it for me, Yogendra Yadav. When you say that that what August 5th, 2020 marks the rise of political majoritarianism, define it for me.
What is being done here is to say, and in fact, I thought Swapan Das Gupta was quite candid about all these things. What we are witnessing is a simple assertion of brute power. We are in majority, we shall decide, and as you correctly pointed out, no one has the courage to punish those who did what is a criminal act in 1992. And if everyone believes that Supreme Court had complete free will in this country to decide the Ram Janambhoomi case any which way, I do not know which country they are living in. I think what had happened, and Swapan Das Gupta correctly described, in fact, I wish I had more conversation with Swapan Das Gupta because he was at least honest. He was straightforward. He was saying, yes, we did violence initially.
No, I resent the fact that you are saying I'm not honest.
No, one minute. Let him finish.
I'm sorry, I withdraw the word
Let's keep it civil. It's a fascinating conversation, and the more civil we keep it, the better. Yes.
I withdraw the word honest. I think Swapan was very candid. I really liked it. He was simply straightforward telling you, yes, we used violence. Thereafter, in the second phase, we did not use violence. He could have said, we did not need violence, because after that, you simply capture the constitutional system. And what has happened in this country today is that the constitution that you and I speak about, Rajdeep, has been changed. Constitution can be changed either through a formal amendment carried out by Parliament of India, etc., or the Constitution can simply be abandoned. You stopped practicing whatever Constitution says, and no one in the world would stop you from doing so. Okay. This is what is actually happening on the ground. We must see the reality. Therefore, while I agree entirely with Pawan Verma on his critique of much of the secular practice, in fact, I have written an article which would please him because I've said most of the things he's speaking about right now. And therefore, I thought today should be a day for introspection for secularism to see where we went wrong. Okay. But if that introspection means that we should celebrate what is happening on the ground, like the Congresses are, I'm afraid that is not my vision of a future of India.
Let me leave it there. I think Pawan Verma, Yogendra Yadav and Swapan Das Gupta with
one last word.
Okay, I have exactly 30 seconds. 30 seconds on the clock.
Yes, sir. I would urge my good friend Yogenji, before he writes the obituary of India as we know it, to trust the sentiments of the Hindus which have begun over the years of Ekam Satya Vipraha Bahuda Vadanti, who have practiced tolerance, and if some fringe elements or some parts of them are misled, don't devalue Hindus or the legacy of Hinduism.
Many believe the fringe is now mainstream, Pawan Verma. The fringe is mainstream. Can we really call the fringe?
Democracy.
Okay, whether we can call many will believe the fringe is now mainstream. Sir, what you call fringe?
Most of them are average.
Pawan Verma, please don't call the Prime Minister of this country fringe.
Most Indians, Hindus or Muslims.
Okay, gentlemen, so I unfortunately have to take a break. This has been fascinating.
Want to take the dividends of the secular mainstream.
Okay, let me leave it there. It's been fascinating to have three articulate voices speak on this day. I appreciate your joining us. Thank you very much. This debate will carry forward. Up next, I'll come back with my image of the day and our Good News Today story. You're watching the News Today. News, as you saw, without the noise. Back in a moment.